Hey, it's so good to finally meet you.
Yes.
So this is Rachel Kovaciny, right?
Kovaciny.
Kovaciny. Oh, I was wrong. Okay.
It's
Rachel is a homeschool mom in Virginia, just like I am. And we've been connected on Instagram for, I don't know, a few years. And both indie authors. And so I'm glad to finally get to talk to you. And I read the first book by Rachel that I read was Dancing and Donuts. She writes westerns based on fairy tales. And they're just like clean, really family friendly types of books. I think that when my kids get maybe a little older, they'll make great family read alouds. So Dancing and Donuts was based on the 12 Dancing Princesses. And we're here to celebrate because Rachel's new book is coming out today, My Rock and My Refuge. Mine is literally arriving today, and I don't have it yet.
cool.
So I'm glad that you have a gorgeous copy yourself. So I
Yes.
could start with talking about My Rock and My Refuge. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. So you have your beautiful person, you have your not so beautiful person. Um, and it takes place in Colorado in 1874. So not a gold rush time, but there's a lot of silver mining going on in Colorado at that time. The gold rush was kind of over for them and had been for like 10 years, but it takes place in a silver mining community, lots of people mining around them, but also like lots of old mines. There used to be gold mines there. The gold kind of played out. The silver is the big thing now, but there's still a little gold here and there for people to find. But that's just kind of the basic setting of it. Is up in the Colorado mountains. You got a pretty wild mix of people because everybody wanted to be a miner, right? Like it's not just young guys or just single guys. You've got people with families. You've got Native Americans. You've got Mexican Americans, Chinese immigrants, Black Americans. Just a big hodgepodge because everybody was very into that. Yeah,
And that's
so
what
it's
you've
about
always tried to highlight in your books is the diversity that I think a lot of Westerns don't show, but you've made it
right.
that point.
Right. Because I'm a history buff and I have a minor in history. It's really important to me to have, if I'm going to be writing historical fiction, I want it to be reflecting actual history. And Hollywood in particular, like in the 40s and 50s when Westerns were the biggest, was very whitewashed and very everybody's all of the famous stars are white, and so all of the everybody on screen is gonna be white. With maybe you get some, you might have some American Indians, maybe they're portrayed positively, maybe not. You might have once in a while somebody who's Chinese or somebody who's Mexican American. You know, there's a few here and there, but the actual West was much more just everybody's trying to survive all together. And yes, there was a lot of conflict sometimes, but there was also just a lot of, hey, we're all trying to survive, so we're not going to fight each other. We're all trying to work things out. So I try to highlight that in my books that there's there's a mix of people. It's not just all one kind of people living
And do you
here.
think that that like actually drew people west, like people like minorities from the east who maybe were experiencing more racism and civil war and things like that? Do you think that the West was actually like more like diverse because of those that?
In some ways, yes. A lot of former slaves, life did not change as much for them after the Civil War as they expected or hoped. And they said, you know what, let's just start over somewhere else. And there's plenty of land in the West, and there's more opportunities, there's more just more places for us to go. Let's just start over there. And and similarly for like Chinese Americans who came over, actually most of the Chinese immigrants who came here came during the gold rush. That was the big impetus because they were having a lot of financial difficulties in China. So they came over for the gold rush, hoping to make money here and take it home. Most Chinese immigrants weren't really immigrants like we think of, where you're moving here to live here. They just came over here hoping to better their lives somewhat and then take their money home. A few of them did come over here saying, we're going to start over. This is a new place. We are gonna live here. Um, but for a lot of people like from South America and Europe, coming to America was just like, yes, this is a place where anybody can work hard and succeed. Don't have to be a certain religion or a certain ethnicity or a certain race or anything like that.
And so your main characters in this one are German American, and you're German American. Is this the first time you've featured main characters that are German like you?
No.
Okay.
In my first book, Cloaked, the well, he's not the main character, but the Cloaked is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and the woodcutter character is a half German American, half Native American named Howard, and he's you find out in this book he's actually a cousin of the main character in My Rock and My Refuge, and
Oh,
her brother. But they've never met him. They just know that they're one of their uncles moved here long ago, and so
oh,
they
okay.
know they have a cousin
No, I
somewhere.
haven't read that one.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do you like what is that fun? Like, what you pulling out some of your German roots and uh,
Yes, that was very fun. So whoops. So I took German in college, because I am half German. My dad's family is German, my mom's family is Dutch, and um, my mom would speak some Dutch around the home just because her parents still knew enough Dutch to like they actually visited Holland and visited some relatives over there, and they could speak Dutch well enough to do that. My dad really didn't ever know German. His dad spoke German and his grandma spoke German, but they never taught it to the kids. And I was just like, oh, I want to learn some German. So I actually took German in college. That's where I met my husband, was in German class, and thought it was fascinating. And I still am learning German today. Just I used Duolingo for a while. Now I'm using just a different German program, but I really enjoy it. And I love like trying German food and German things like that. And I think it's fun. So it was fun to develop these characters who are from Germany and to just kind of learn about, oh, what was a bakery like in Germany at this time? How much power did the guilds still have? What
right?
what opportunities were there for women in Germany versus here? And yeah.
And that was one of the things I enjoyed in My Rock and My Refuge was the even though like we never saw Germany, um, as German Americans, like they're obviously contrasting everything with back home. So it's like you obviously had done your research, and so we're set in Colorado, but we're kind of learning about like a whole lot of different types of things, and it was just uh, a lot of bases were covered, and it was great. So
It was a lot of research for this one of just really, really, really different things, like learning about Germany, learning about how to bake back then. How do you bake with a wood-fired like oven, and how is that different? She has to throughout the story, she has to learn how to bake a little bit in like an iron cook stove, whereas back home she would have had a brick oven, and you would have been baking, lots of loaves all at a time one time, and she's like, oh, it's such a pain to have to try to keep this oven at the right temperature. And yeah.
yeah, so I highly recommend My Rock and My Refuge. My review will be going up on Thursday. So yeah, I'll have my paper back by then, so it can be in the picture. But anyway, congratulations on your release. We do have some more general questions about your writing, if you're willing to share a little bit. We would love to hear about Rachel's heart. Rachel is part of the Christian Mommy Writers, and yeah. So when did you first fall in love with writing?
um I first started seriously writing when I was 14. And I had a very vivid dream one night. It was a like World War II based, just like I was very interested in World War II history, and I still am. But at that point in my life, I was just very interested in World War II history, and I had this dream about brothers who were soldiers, and it had a whole plot to it. And I was like, I really liked that dream, and I wish that I could see it as a movie, but I can't actually make movies. So I will try to write it down, and I did, and I was like, oh, I can't actually make movies, but I could make books and stories, and I could do that. So then I just kept started actually like learning how to be a creative writer. I've always been a storyteller. I've always made up stories, and 99% of the things that I played as a child was storytelling in some way, whether it was Barbie dolls or action figures or Lego guys or whatever. Um, but I really started like, how do you write a story? How do you come up with a story? And starting to like look up books at the library of how would I get better at this, and how do you? I really started pursuing it, I guess. So
So was
yep.
that then your first book was that story, or is your first book a different story?
That was a short story. I wrote a lot of short stories. I didn't, so this was in like the mid 90s and I didn't have internet yet. I was typing on my mom's old electric typewriter and I didn't know that fan fiction actually was a thing, but I really liked writing stories about my favorite characters from my favorite TV shows. And so I actually was writing a lot of fan fiction before I knew fan fiction existed. So I wrote a lot of short stories in my teens. I didn't really write a book length book until I was out of college. Um, and then I decided after I graduated from college, I was like, all right, I've got this, degree in, I have a minor in history and a minor in English, and I'm gonna try it. And everybody's first book I know is generally crap. So I'm just gonna write my first book and get the crap out of my system and just be done with the junk and the trash that I need to get out of my system. And it took me like 4 years to write my first book. And then I don't think anybody will ever read it because it was trash. It was just all the junk I needed to get out of my head before I could do it. But
So when did the Westerns show up? Was that the fan fiction, or when did Westerns start being a
I
part
did
of?
I did do some Western fan fiction. Can remember writing a couple of stories for Big Valley and I think one for Cheyenne back when I was a teenager. And then I wrote a series of short stories when I was in college. My brother and I loved to play with Legos. And when I was in high school, we made this whole Western town out of all of our Legos. And there actually were old Wild West like Legos at that time.
Yeah, right. I think my husband has them. Yeah.
Yes, yes. There's like a sheriff, and there was like this bad guys, and there were a few like American Indians, and there was a fort. So we had a few of those, and then we just made up a whole bunch of things, and we made up all these characters, and we played all these different storylines with them. And I had so much fun with them, and I loved those little Lego guys we had made so much that when I was in college, I wrote a bunch of short stories based around them with just like these little characters we had made up when I was in high school. So those are really the first Westerns that I wrote seriously. But then I wrote 5 novels that were all modern day, just straight up fiction
Oh, really?
before I ever wrote another Western. And then it was after my third kid was born. So it was just not quite 10 years ago. I was like, I have this idea for a Western, and I haven't written a Western in a long time. And I think it's going to be like a young adult story. I'm just going to try it. And I started writing it. And I think I was 2 or 3 chapters in, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to write anything but Westerns ever again because I love this so much. This is like home because I grew up watching Westerns and reading some Westerns, but just and playing cowboys all the time and learning about Western history. And it was just like, oh, I know all of this stuff. I used to ride horses, and I was like, I know how to muck out a stable, and I know how to pick a horse's hooves, and I know what you have to do to curry a horse and brushing them, and how I was like, oh, they tell you to write what you know. I just realized I know a lot about this. So yeah, it's been entirely historical fiction since then, and mostly Westerns.
Well, that's cool how you found your niche and you kind of get the sense like this is what God made me to do all along.
Kind of, yeah, yeah. Just like, oh, I wasn't realizing that I was uniquely like suited to this specific genre, but I am.
But you are, yeah. So what do you want readers to feel or know when they read your novels?
I want readers to have fun. Like, to me, reading is a joy and a pleasure and a little bit of an escape, but just a fun, enjoyable activity. So I want my books to be fun. Sometimes they are serious. There's some serious stuff in my Rock and My Refuge, especially. And One Bad Apple had a lot of serious stuff in it, but it's never like dark,
Yeah.
disturbing, or like making the reader feel melancholy. Like you always know that it's gonna end well. Moral balance will be restored. There's going to be a happy ending. And so even though you're like, oh, I'm a little worried right now about this character, this is some bad stuff that's going on, it's going to be okay. It'll be fine. So that's like, I just want people to have fun and to enjoy reading. But also, and I always also do a little uplifting. Like I love the genre of uplit, which is supposed to be kind of uplifting and brightening your life and bringing you to maybe a realization you hadn't made before about whether it's faith or about relationships or something where you're like, oh, I feel like I've learned something, and I'm a little better now than I was when I started reading.
Well, I think that what you just said. I think it's definitely things that I got when I read your books. Like I find them hard to put down, and a lot of it is just because I enjoy it so much. It's not so much that like a suspense that's keeping me turning pages. I'm turning pages because I am having fun, and like I messaged you the other day, like there is really something to be said about books about likable people,
Yes.
and I want to spend time with them. And so I think that's part of that fun is, and I'm more willing to maybe learn from them because I like them and I wanted to spend time with them. So
Yeah, yeah.
I would say that those are all,
What always draws me to a book, whether I'm reading it or writing it, or what draws me to movies, TV shows, all stories is characters. For me, I have to want to be friends with the characters. I want to just hang out with them. And that's why I'm a junkie for long books and long series. You write me a 20-book series, I'm so happy because I can hang out with my friends fictionally,
Mhm.
and I love that, and I love a good long TV series, and so yeah, I'm gonna write books about people that I enjoy hanging out with, and I hope other people would too, because that's what storytelling for me is. It's just let's go hang out with some people for a while.
Yeah, some nice people. So yeah, that's one of my plugs right here. So pick up Rachel's books because you just enjoy it so much. Um, the journey is great. So what has surprised you in your writing journey or about your writing journey?
Hmm. It has a little bit surprised me that um, people still really love westerns. Like western movies are a little passe, and people don't make a lot of them anymore. Western fiction thrives, especially in the Christian genres. Christian westerns are everywhere, and I don't know that I was all that aware of it before I started writing and publishing it myself, and then discovered, oh, I'm not this weird throwback person who's still mentally living in the 60s. Um, there's a lot out there, and people enjoy that setting a lot more than I kind of expected.
So do you know why? Like, what are some of the draws you think that draw people?
I think first of all, westerns are kind of our American mythology, so
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
tell really big stories with lots of like epic themes, archetypical characters. They just work really well in the westerns. So you can have you can use the mythic tropes really well in the West. And also people just really like the possibilities. The West represents like just endless possibility. You can go there and start over. And you can start over again if you have to. And you can reinvent yourself, or you can find yourself, or you can find out what you're good at. It's very freeing, but also focusing at the same time. Like you can just go out to the West and figure out who you are and what you're going to do, because you have to figure out who you are and what you're going to do, especially at that time, because you need to survive, and there's a pretty big chance something bad's going to happen to you at some point, because if you're not, if you don't die of dysentery on the way, you're going to get snake bitten, or it's like playing the Oregon Trail, where you enjoy playing it because there's so much that can happen. There's a lot of scope for stuff happening, and I think that draws a lot of people to westerns, of just that you have to kind of rely on yourself, but you also can't rely only on yourself. You have to be the best version of yourself, but you also have to come together in a community to make things work.
Yeah, sure. So this question isn't on my list, but is there a setting or historical piece in the West that you haven't written about that like you'd like to someday that's captured you?
Um, well, not the next book that I write, but the last one in the series is going to be set on the Santa Fe Trail. And I don't know very much at all about the Santa Fe Trail. I just know enough to know it's really, really interesting that this was like the super highway going through the middle of the country, and we were trading goods with Mexico and beyond. And I really want to learn more about that because I haven't learned a lot about it. So I know I want to write something set there. Um, which yeah, I haven't written anything in the Southwest. I haven't written anything in California, anything like that. So there's a lot of stuff that I could get into. I haven't written about the loggers. There were a lot of loggers out in the West
Okay.
cutting things, timber to ship back east to build things. And I haven't written very much about actual cowboys yet. People are
That's
like, oh yeah, you write cowboy books. I'm like, well, um, well, there's ranch in the first book. The second book does have somebody who was a cowboy, but now he's not. And the third book is about like pioneers. They want to go start farms. And this one's about miners. But the next one is going to be a steadfast tin soldier retelling, and it's going to have lots of actual cowboys, and it's going to
okay.
have everybody's like, you just don't write very like gunfights. There aren't any gunfights. We always expect gunfights. Yeah, the next one we'll have gunfights and fist fights, and it's going to be very different from this one. But
That's so funny that you haven't really done cowboys yet. I feel like that's kind of part of your brand.
right, cowboys, and my whole house is full of things that say things like I should have been a cowboy, or yeah, and like, well, the West was a lot more than just cowboys, but I should really do a good solid cowboy story before I end the series. So,
Yeah, I guess because you're highlighting more things, like the cowboy thing's been done more, and you're highlighting things that haven't been done as much. I
yeah,
would say Stephanie Daniels, her work in progress is Southwest, and uh, the first book she wrote, Uncertainty of Fire, at the end has some like Arizona territory. So talk to her about it,
cool.
especially if you can cross promote, because she writes YA also.
Uh-huh.
Um, so, have you had to sacrifice anything for the sake of your writing?
Sleep. I've
Yeah.
sacrificed a lot of sleep.
Okay, go eat. I'm on an interview, Eddie. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I can write nonfiction with my kids around. I can write blog posts with them around. I can do a lot of writing with them. I cannot write fiction with other people interacting with me and interrupting me and coming and saying, "Hi, mommy, I just wanted you to know I love you." I'm like, "I love you too, but I'm trying to. You just pulled me out of the fictive dream that I was
Yeah.
deeply in the zone." Thanks a lot. So I mostly write either on Saturday morning when my husband's here hanging out with the kids, or if I put everybody to bed, and then I'm writing until 11:30 at night, and then realizing I should probably have gone to sleep a while ago.
So, yeah. So, do your kids love your books? Do they read them?
They do. They're my ideal audience. I write them so that they can have something new to read. And they
You
they
don't read them
are
to them; they read them themselves
they
individually.
can read themselves. Yes. I now part of my editing process or my revising process, my both, is once I've got it pretty darn well done, I will read the whole thing out loud to them to find all the glitches and the
Right.
places where I reuse the same word over and over in one page, and all my typos and things like that. So they do get to hear a not quite finished version read aloud. They aren't required to sit here and listen to it. I'm just like, I'm going to be reading it aloud for the next however long it takes me. But they usually do. They come and they sit and listen and ask questions and whatever.
Do
But
they give you like
they're my
suggestions for
proofreaders
correction?
too. They're very good proofreaders, all three of
Do
them.
they
So
catch stuff?
yes.
Do they ever go like, "Mom, don't make the character do that. Have them do this"?
No, not generally, but they do like to discuss how come this character said that, and I really thought this character was going to get together with that character, or things like that, where they're like, I wasn't expecting this to happen, and yeah,
That's so fun to have them all involved.
yes,
What is something you love to do when you're not writing?
I love to watch movies.
Yeah.
I love to read books. I like to bake and cook and crochet and sometimes knit and sew and do photography and once in a while I even have time to like play my piano, and yeah, I'm never bored. I garden too, so
Having those like other kind of creative outlets helps with writing, though it does. So
I think it does. Yeah, because it's not like this isn't the only thing I can do, and it's like I never get. I talk to writers once in a while, and they'll be like, I just feel emotionally like attached to the writing in a weird way. Like if I can't write, then I start to feel like I'm not well, and I'm not doing it because I'm not creating, or because if I'm, have writer's block, then I'm everything is wrong because that's my creative outlet and I'm not creating. And I'm like, so then I go out and like plant flowers or, you know, make my kids some doll clothes or something. Like you could do other things too. It doesn't have to just be writing. Go learn to arrange flowers or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even as you work the different parts of your brain and do different things, like, I don't know, I think it helps to make all of it better in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are some of your favorite authors and two or three of your favorite books?
Well, three of my favorite books is easier. My favorite novel is Jane Eyre, and my Rock and My Refuge does draw in some Jane Eyre things because I see Jane Eyre as a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I mean, it just hits so many of the Beauty and the Beast beats in my mind that I consider it a retelling of that. So since it's my favorite novel, I definitely pulled some stuff from it for my Rock and My Refuge, like the employer-employee like dynamic of there's not an equality here, and how do we meet each other where we're equals kind of thing, and a few other things for that. So that's my favorite novel is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and my second favorite is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alejandro Dumas, which I have loved since I was 11 years old, and my mom let me check it out of the grown-up section at the library. And the version that I read when I was 11, it was like this. It was not very big. It was just this small
Oh,
little
really?
book. It was, I mean, it was kind of thick. It was hugely thick. It had the tiniest little words you've ever seen. It was just like the just infinitesimal print, and I was like, well, I'm glad I'm 11 years old and I have good eyes. Yeah, it was like an antique, just stuck away in some dusty shelf in my library. But I loved it. I didn't understand about a third of it. I had no idea what hashish was, so that was probably good. But but I loved it. I loved the characters and I loved the story, and I still love it. I just reread it last year. It's like, yeah, this is still my number 2 favorite book. Yeah.
That's great.
And my number 3 favorite book would be Lord of the Rings by Tolkien.
Way to smash those in there in one.
Well, they are one book. I mean, they're one book in 6 parts. So, so they get published as 3, but he envisioned them as one, and his publishers were like, I'm sorry, dude. Nobody
Yeah.
buys 1,000-page books, and nobody's ever heard of epic fantasy before because you just invented this genre. So we're gonna make it a little easier for people to read. But I do consider it just one book. So
Yeah, I read all those ones you mentioned. Good choices.
cool.
Um,
Well, yes, my favorite books are not all that obscure. My favorite author is Raymond Chandler, who wrote hard-boiled detective fiction in the 30s and 40s. And not a lot of people today read Raymond Chandler, but the most famous one of his is The Big Sleep, which was a Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall movie in the 40s. That's the one most people have heard of. But yep,
so
hard-boiled
what do you love
detective.
about his books?
Hmm?
What is it that you love about his books?
I love his writing. He writes the most absurd, beautiful, surprising descriptions of things. He writes things like, her hair was a hot sunset. And just, it was a blonde who would make a bishop kick a hole in a stained glass window. Like, you just hear this and you're like, holy cow, I can't believe you just said that. That makes absolutely no sense. That makes absolutely perfect sense, though. Like, what? What? He described a fly that was annoying the main character as being glittering and full of sin. And just, I mean, he just writes these things. I read his books and I'll read about a paragraph and then I'll stop for a minute and be like, absorb that, and then we can go on. I always read at least one of his books when I'm polishing up mine because it will juice up my prose a little bit too. Just the rubbing off of him. My favorite line of his is that I went out to the kitchen to make coffee, yards of coffee, rich, bitter, boiling hot, ruthless, depraved, the lifeblood of tired men. And I'm like, I have had days where I needed coffee that was exactly like that.
That's so great.
Yes.
Have you read all his books now then?
I have. I've read all of his books multiple times. He only wrote Gosh, what, eight, I think, eight or nine novels, and then a bunch of short stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He also did a bunch of screenplays. He like Double Indemnity, the famous film noir. He did the screenplay for that, and a couple of Alan Ladd movies, and if Olivia is still watching, she's laughing right now because she knew I'd say Alan Ladd sometime during this interview. Um, yeah, so he's my favorite author. I also love L.M. Montgomery, like the Anne books, and
Yeah.
she wrote a lot of amazing. Those are probably a lot more similar to the books I write than, than Chandler's are. Chandler's are all about bad people doing bad things, and detective has to solve the crime and stuff. And I like Arthur Conan Doyle and lots of detective stuff. I love Sherlock Holmes.
Like trying to figure out the mystery as you read.
No, I don't want to figure out the mystery. If I figure out the mystery beforehand, I feel cheated because that detective should be smarter than me. I read The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie for the first time last month, and I was so upset because I figured it out about 2/3 of the way through, and I was like, I know, I'm sure of it. And I got to the end and I was right, and I was like, I was really hoping that there would be just a last minute ha ha ha, you were wrong. It wasn't. Yeah, see, there's Olivia. She knew I was gonna say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to a friend this week about Doyle, and they were saying that that's what was so excellent about his books is that like you're always surprised, like you can't figure it out. And I guess I think some people like to have like the clues along the way that you can figure out, but with him, it's like I don't
See, now I insist that the clues have to be there. It is not fair. I don't actually like the Miss Marple books very much because you don't get all of the clues. And she's, she'll at the end she'll be like, well, I happen to know this random arcane fact about this particular kind of woe, and I just had a sense that this person was not good, or I knew this, and I'm like, no, that's not playing fair. Doyle plays fair. You can follow the clues. Watson tells you all the things you need to know. You just don't figure it out because you're not as smart as Sherlock Holmes is. But it's all there. Then once you know the solution, you can read it over again and be like, I understand now. I can follow. Now I'm smart because I know how it ends. But
yeah, I'd have to agree. That's the most satisfying kind of mystery. That's when you know it's a master.
Yeah, and that's hard to do. I've only ever written one full-on mystery, which is Dancing in Donuts, and I love to read mysteries, but man, they are a pain to write. You have to know everything. You have to know everything that everybody is doing at all times so that everything matches up and you have all the clues come out at the right. Oh,
yeah,
that was exhausting.
That was a good mystery, though. I mean, because it kept you guessing. That was nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's not super hard to figure out, especially if you know the fairy tale, but it works as a mystery too. So.
I mean, that's what I like about the fairy tale retellings is how they don't exactly necessarily line up, with the fairy tale. And so you do have things that are surprises,
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've read this before.
Yeah. I always try to take the fairy tale and like, that's the trunk of my tree. And then, some of the branches are there. But the story that I'm telling is like, that's the leaves. So
right.
You have the kind of basic shape, but the shape is different without the leaves on it as it is with the leaves on it.
Yeah, I like that. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about your books is, it's not just like I've read this before at all.
I try not to do that because I get bored reading the same thing over and over myself. No, I don't. I read the same thing over and over all the time. I've read Lord of the Rings 9 times and I don't get tired of it, but but I don't want to read the same story told basically the same way over and over. Yeah.
What advice would you give other moms who want to write?
Just don't give up. Like, yeah, you might have to not sleep as much, or you might have to tell your, depending on how old your kids are, you might have to tell your husband, Saturday morning, you're making breakfast and I'm spending, the hour that I would spend making breakfast and cleaning the kitchen, that's going to be my hour to write. Or can you, can you play with the kids after supper for half an hour and I'll write then? Or, my kids are older now, so I can just say, hey, I'm gonna go write. If you really need me, knock on my door, but I'm gonna go be upstairs and just be away. I don't do it very often because I homeschool, so most of my daytime is like
I'm doing
teaching.
interviews or go in the other room and be quiet for half an hour.
Yeah, they're in the basement right now. I was like, go play in the basement. And they're like, oh, we wanted to have a little meeting anyway. We have secrets to discuss. I'm like, well, Christmas is coming in a month and a half, so I guess that's probably not too scary, but okay.
So they're pretty supportive of your writing and giving you the time that you need for that.
They are usually. Although this last month has been hard on them because it has been a lot of you go read your history and you go read your science, and I'm gonna, try to proofread this little section while you're doing that. Let me know if you have a problem, and then I'll come back to you or whatever. And yeah, usually I'm just there at the table and they're doing their schoolwork and I'm helping and whatever. But there has been a lot of once your math is done, you're kind of on your own unless you have a question, trying to get things finished. But they're finished now, so they have a lot more attention from me now.
Relatable.
Yes.
Do you think any of them are turning into storytellers?
Yes, all three of them. In fact, I think what their secret the meeting downstairs is they're secretly writing a story all together, based on a Roblox game, I think, that they all like to play. And they're having they're having fun plotting that out and stuff. But my 10-year-old is writing an epic, many books long fantasy series that she's got going. She's finished the first book and she's got the next two planned. And my almost 13-year-old, she's writing this. They love fantasy. I don't read much fantasy. They love fantasy. She's writing this other fantasy series, and my son has been writing sci-fi things for years. And yeah, they all write, and then they bring me things, and they're like, "Can you proofread this for me?" And I can't get out of this. I'm stuck in this section, and I don't know how to get out of it. Can you give me ideas? And,
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
it
Nice.
is fun.
How can we be praying for your writing journey?
Right now I just need rest. I am really,
I mean,
really
launch
tired
is
from
exhausting.
this book. This is the thickest book I've ever written. I've never written something this big before. And yeah,
Launching a book is draining. So
yeah, it was really draining. Just this last month wasn't like writing. This last month was just proofreading 100,000 words over and over, and formatting 100,000 words. And I was like, I know this is twice as big as my previous books, so I know it's going to take, but I expect it to take twice as long, not 3 times as long. Just the huge number of words was taxing. It was taxing. So I just need to recharge now and refresh. And I have warned everybody I'm not starting on the next book until at least February, because I need to
it's like having a
rest.
baby. You just need to have something exciting.
In many ways, yes, it is like having a baby where you're like, I really want to have this baby. I really want to have this baby. Wow, that was a lot of work. Great, now I have a baby. Now I'm tired. Yeah.
Yeah, like, don't talk to me about the next one right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so you have a blog tour this week, right? Or social media.
Yes, it's blogs and Instagram, so it's an online tour. And I have, I think, 3 or 4 days where there's an Instagram review coming and a blog review, and then the last couple days of it are going to be like just blog stuff. I've got a couple blog interviews set up and stuff like that. But yeah,
So that's
fun stuff.
your main launch activities is that at this point?
Yes, that's my main launch activities, plus this interview, plus tonight at 10 o'clock tonight. I'm going to come back on Instagram Live and I'm going to read the first couple of chapters out loud, and just like my kids will be in bed, and my husband isn't home today because he's actually a volunteer election officer, so he's at the polls all day and he won't get home until late. So I'll have some quiet time this evening, and I'm just going to read the first few chapters out loud. And
So guys, come back for that. That is exciting. You can get a preview of the book, and you also have a giveaway going on right now.
Yes, yes, with two prizes or two prize packages. One of them is like fairy tale themed, so Beauty and the Beast coloring book and like just more Beauty and the Beast kind of stuff. And then the other one is more Old West stuff. It's got a puzzle with a train because there's a train in the story that gets mentioned a few times, and it's like a train in the mountains and stuff, and a pioneer cooking cookbook, which is fun.
That's great. So yeah, check out Rachel's um, social media and find all the details for how to enter all those things and come back for her reading the first few chapters tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you. You'll
Yes,
see my interview coming up on Thursday, and congratulations again on the release
thank you.
of Rock and My Refuge, and thanks for spending time with me.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, I'll make it so so we can share it and people can watch it later. So
Excellent. Thank you.
have a good one.
You too.